Richard Kirk, Chief Executive, Polyphotonix. My company does two things. So we are primarily a company of physicists and chemists, and we develop OLEDs, organic light-emitting diodes. I'm talking today about a spin-out, if you like, from the company that uses organic light-emitting diodes. This is an image from my factory. We have about 1,200 square meters of Class 100 clean room, with about £40 million worth of investment into that, and I'll come back to that at the end of the presentation. So, a great slide to start with. One of our biggest funders to date has been the NHS. That's very nice because the NHS will be a very large user, so one of our largest customers funds us. Earlier last year, they put an independent health economist onto the product, and this is an extract from the report, a 30-page report about the product. And basically, well, you can see it yourself, we believe there's such compelling health economic argument for the mask that we intend to put the technology forward for appraisal by NICE as soon as clinical effectiveness data becomes available. And that's because the NHS is currently spending over 10 billion a year treating diabetes, and one of the largest portions of that is diabetic eye disease, diabetic retinopathy. So we've developed a mask. This is a section of the mask broken out. There's quite a lot in there. There's an OLED, which is my interest. There's an intelligent PCB board with some chips, and that captures information. And it's all housed together in a plastic casing, which goes into a mask. So we're talking about a sleeping mask. This is it. Something similar to you'd be given on an aeroplane. Very comfortable. There's been a hell of a lot of product design into this. And it's designed to be worn at night as you go to sleep. I won't tell you about the mechanics of diabetic retinopathy. I can describe to you how that happens perhaps later if anybody's interested. But the underlying problem is that when the eye goes to sleep, it dark adapts. Now, counterintuitively, when it dark adapts, your oxygen requirement almost doubles. And that's the underlying problem. We've got to prevent the eye from dark adapting. And it's that simple. So in order to do this, and it sounds incredibly simple, almost stupid, we've built a very powerful advisory board. So there's some people on here who are the influencers, if you like. Simon Harding is world-renowned clinician, currently chair of clinical ophthalmology at Liverpool. And we also have Ian Grierson, who wrote the books. Whenever you talk in Europe about diabetic retinopathy, Ian's name always appears. He's currently special trustee at Moorfield. But as you can see, we work with a number of people, and we run clinical trials in the Czech Republic as well. Sue mentioned earlier about the TSB and the various other funding mechanisms in the UK. I can only say it worked very, very well, and if anybody's interested in looking at those funding mechanisms, I can't praise it high enough. We've had almost 8 million from the TSB. It's 8 million sterling in 4 years, which is a remarkable amount of money for a very small company. That hasn't all been based around the mask. Some of that is on our process side of the business. But in terms of the mask, the TSB working with the NHS and working with the SBRI and the KTM programs where we have the ability to fund postdocs into universities. I'm currently funding 3 postdocs in universities. It's a mechanism that works extremely well. There's no bureaucracy either, so have a look at it. So the 3 diseases that we look at. Today I'm concentrating on diabetic retinopathy, the first one, but we're also very interested in wet age-related macular degeneration. The first one is obviously lifestyle, and we all know the issues in India. The second one is demographics. As we're getting older, we are starting to develop AMD, as we call it. And that's something we have clinical trials underway at the moment for. The last one is dry AMD. Now, dry AMD is a very small portion of the population, but there really isn't a treatment currently. It's very aggressive, dry AMD, and from early diagnosis to complete blindness can be a matter of just a few months. And we're also working in that area as well. But as I say today, it's all about diabetic retinopathy. Global epidemic. We know that India has, well, it depends whose figures you read, and they vary wildly. But who gives, 10, 20 million here or there, it's still a massive problem. But it's a massive problem all over the world. And if we look at just some of these figures, based on a sort of $40 a month mask. We're looking at a billion and billions of dollars of a business here. That's a little bit further down. Now, the interesting bit on this slide is the DR market assessment. There's two types of diabetes. Type 1, genetic. 90% of people with type 1 will develop some form of diabetic retinopathy within 10 years of diagnosis. That's 90%. It's horrendous. Type 2, which is the tsunami that's approaching, 67% of people. That's incredible. Those figures are huge. And when you think that India has a 50 million profiled, recognized diabetic population, you know, it could be double or triple that are pre-diabetic. It's very scary. China is already spending 30 billion a year treating diabetes. So it's a huge problem. So this is one of, I've just put this up because these slides were taken from one of our very there, but we have a before and after. So on the left, you have patients, horizontally before and after, left before treatment, right after treatment. It's not very clear, so I'll shout. If you think this is the back of the eye, down here, and this is the front of the eye, so the photon is coming through this wall of vessels. The eye is particularly badly designed, actually. Perfect. Thank you. The eye is particularly badly designed. This is the back of the eye. This area here is where the photoreceptors are, your rods and cones, and the photons come in through this area. But to penetrate the rods and cones, they have to pass through this layer here, which is where all the vessels that deliver the oxygen to the eye work. It's like looking at the television screen and having to look at all the electronics before you can see the screen. And that's the way the eye's designed. With diabetic patients, this area here becomes very extended. You have a breakdown in those cells, which I won't go into, but you get cysts forming. This is a very bad cyst here. This is a very bad cyst. This is after treatment. This is after only 6 months of treatment. And you can see in this case, this cyst has completely disappeared. In this case, this layer here has almost returned to normal. And again, these two cysts have vastly reduced in size. Again, before and after scans, red is bad, and yellow is bad as well. And as you can see, there's a significant improvement. So, sorry, going too fast. So, where does it compare with the current treatments? Well, the inverted triangle is here. The NHS is not in the business of prevention. It's really only in the business of treatment. And at some point in the disease path, they will intervene and recommend one of two treatments. This is laser treatment, and we all know people who have undergone laser treatment. Typically, you will lose your driving license after 3 laser treatments. It's a bit of a scattergun approach. At best, it delays the inevitable, it delays the onset. But it's a highly skilled intervention that needs to take place within a clinical environment. It's very, very expensive. The other one is intraocular therapy. Now, only 2-3 weeks ago in the UK, there was a drug called Lucentis, which was approved by NICE for use with diabetics, whereas previously it had only been approved for AMD patients. The ophthalmological world is in blind panic about this now. Health governments around the world simply cannot afford this. We're looking at about an average of £12,000 for an 18-month treatment, and nobody knows when the treatment stops. It's basically you anesthetize the eye, you penetrate the eye, you inject into the back of the eye. It's an anti-VEGF drug. It prevents the VEGF protein. It's extremely painful and actually only works in less than 50% of patients anyway. So it's a big problem. We run routine focus groups with most of the major macular eye disease charities, diabetes charities. We know that people who undergo this treatment dread it. It's very painful. This is heroic treatment, really. So the mask. You wear the mask. It, to some degree, repairs the eye. It treats. But the mask does more than that. It has a high degree of intelligence. So each mask is personalized to the individual with patient numbers. It understands how the individual's sleeping pattern is, how the individual reacts to certain types of wavelengths. Not everybody is receptive to exactly the same. You wear the mask. Now, and compliance is very important. Type 2 diabetics generally smoke a lot, eat a lot, drink a lot. They're not the most compliant population. You need to understand if they're actually wearing the mask. Now, it's important to note, and this is something that I don't really understand in terms of the Indian market, how you measure and record. Most people with diagnosed diabetes undergo scans, usually quarterly in the UK, usually through your optometrist, but with your ophthalmologist as well. So you're returning to your ophthalmologist every 3 months. It's all very well if you're given this, but if you're not wearing it, then it's useless. You're not taking the medicine. So there's a number of sensors in here, capacitive sensors, that understand when it's being worn, on what day it's being worn, at what time. Each device is programmed to only turn on at a particular month, so you can't wear a January mask in December, for example. So it's part of a prescribed delivery system. And this is what the NHS like. This is all about primary care. It's about getting those people who are diagnosed with diabetes out of the NHS and self-treating, over the counter eventually, and that's where we're going with it. All that information is registered, it's put back into the data management system and sent back to the ophthalmologist, who will then compare, monitor, and describe a new treatment. We have CE approval. We also have ISO. We have a full supply chain audited and approved, and we're in production. We are currently shipping to the Czech Republic and the UK for limited pilot trials. So limited pilot trials mean we're just looking at a few thousand patients. We tend to work very slowly, we get things right. There's a lot of data management systems that have been currently set up, new software is being developed and written all the time to do this. That's basically the eye mask. A couple of words about Polyphotonix, who we are. Again, some images of the factory. One of my backers is the Centre for Process Innovation in the UK. They are a government agency, and we have special permission from the Minister of State, no less, for them to invest and support and to an extent incubate Polyphotonix, but we are a private limited company. We separated out after only about 6 months of incubation, and we've been a private limited company for about 4 years now. But it does mean that we have full access and use of these incredible state-of-the-art facilities. So, in a nutshell, we make OLEDs. I won't describe what that is, but that's for want of a better word, a printed light source, large area lighting. The important thing is that we can tailor and develop our own energy curves. We can dope light or reduce light or center our peak of activity energy levels very, very precisely. Now, when you're dealing with the eye, you only want to excite particular parts of the eye. And all the other energy, all the blues and the reds, or whatever you're using, is almost useless. So we have the ability to do that. The other thing we do is we develop processes for making OLEDs in very high volumes. And where do we get our money from? Well, we work with people like Jaguar, Land Rover, Nissan. This is a recent Qashqai we developed with Nissan. So we have a commercial arm as well that develops OLED. Thank you very much. Any questions?